So here we're going to understand pulmonary circulation. But before we jump into that, we need to understand that there are 3 different ways in which we can define circulation. We have pulmonary circulation, which looks at how blood moves through the heart to the lungs and then back to the heart. We have systemic circulation, which looks at how blood moves throughout the whole body. And then we have coronary circulation, which is blood moving within the heart to oxygenate the cells of the heart. So those are the 3 categories: pulmonary, systemic, coronary. Now, when we talk about pulmonary circulation, we begin our journey at either the superior or inferior vena cava. Remember that this is the right side of your heart, and then this is the left side of your heart. And the superior vena cava is essentially bringing deoxygenated blood from the superior portion of their body, and the inferior vena cava is bringing deoxygenated blood from the inferior portion of your body. Now, the deoxygenated blood enters, whether it enters through the inferior or superior vena cava, it ends up in your right atrium. Now, this deoxygenated blood that has entered into your right atrium, its whole purpose for coming into the heart is to get reoxygenated. And in order to get reoxygenated, it needs to go to the lungs. So the first step is getting this deoxygenated blood to the lungs. Now, one quick thing that I want to mention is that I've denoted deoxygenated blood in blue, and I've denoted oxygenated blood in a bright red. Now, we need to understand that blood itself in the human body, it's not actually blue. It's just a different shade of red. It's more of a deoxygenated blood is going to be darker red. But we show it in blue in textbooks and in diagrams just for simplicity. Now, so we have this deoxygenated blood, and it's going to go from the right atrium to the right ventricle, and in order to get to the right ventricle, it has to pass through this valve. And this valve is called the tricuspid valve. And essentially the whole purpose of these various valves is to control that blood flow and to prevent any backflow. Now, this first valve over here that connects the atrium to the ventricle is the tricuspid valve. It's really important to remember that this one is the tricuspid because on the left-hand side, this mitral valve is also called the bicuspid. So we have a tricuspid and a bicuspid. The way we can remember that where the bicuspid and tricuspid are is that tricuspid is on the right side. So it has that R. So R for right. So tricuspid is on the right side. Now our deoxygenated blood is in our right ventricle. It's going to pass through another valve. And this one is called the pulmonary valve. And after the deoxygenated blood passes through that pulmonary valve, it's going to enter the pulmonary artery. Now remember, when we previously defined arteries and veins, we said arteries move blood away from the heart. So we are gonna go away from the heart. And veins bring blood to the heart. That's really important to remember. It would be incorrect to say that arteries carry oxygenated blood and veins carry deoxygenated blood, although that is much more common in the human body. This is actually an example where the artery is carrying deoxygenated blood and we're going to see a vein carrying oxygenated blood. So essentially, it's more accurate to say that arteries move blood away from the heart and veins move blood to the heart. And we can draw that in for simplicity. So away, and this is going to be coming in. Now, once we are in the pulmonary artery, this pulmonary artery is going to take that deoxygenated blood to the lungs, and that blood is going to be reoxygenated at the lungs. Now, once that blood is oxygenated, it's going to come back to the heart, and it's going to come back through the pulmonary vein. It's going to come back through the pulmonary vein, and remember also that we have a right lung and a left lung. So this pulmonary artery, over here it's going off to the left lung, but also over here it's going off to the right lung. So then when we have oxygenated blood coming back, it's coming back from both sides. We have pulmonary vein on both sides. So we're just focusing on this side over here. So the oxygenated blood comes back from the lungs through the pulmonary vein, and it enters into the left atrium. So whether it's coming from this side, this lung, or this lung, it's going to pool into the left atrium, and from that left atrium, it's going to pass through another valve, which we previously defined as the mitral valve, but remember this can also be called the bicuspid. Once we pass through that bicuspid or mitral valve, we are now in the left ventricle. And now the left ventricle, we will pass on the blood through this other valve. This valve is called the aortic valve. It's called the aortic valve because now we are going to be entering the aorta. So the left ventricle passes the blood onto the aorta, and then the aorta, it's going to pump out the blood with lots of pressure, and it's going to go circle through the body. And once it circles through the body and it's deoxygenated, it's going to enter through our vena cavas once again. So to quickly summarize, we can either enter to the superior and inferior vena cava. We're in our right atrium. Through the right atrium, we pass through our tricuspid valve. We are in the right ventricle. We pass through the pulmonary valve. We go off into the pulmonary artery. We're in the lungs. We get oxygenated. We come back through the pulmonary vein. Now we're in the left atrium. We pass through the mitral or bicuspid valve. We're in the left ventricle. We pass through the aortic valve. Now we're in the aorta, and the oxygenated blood is pumped off to the rest of the body. Now, one more thing that I want to define here is that when we talked about our valves, we have two different categories for our valves, and we should be familiar with these names because we'll see these often in textbooks. So we have two categories. We have the atrioventricular valves and we have the semilunar valves. The atrioventricular valves are your tricuspid and bicuspid. So your tricuspid, your bicuspid, those are your atrioventricular valves. And then you also have your semilunar valves, which are your pulmonary and aortic. So your pulmonary and your aortic are your semilunar valves. So just be familiar with these variations in names because you can see these in textbooks and in other diagrams. But that is essentially pulmonary circulation. It follows how we can reoxygenate our blood through the help of the heart and the lungs to pump it off to the rest of the body.